This episode on Precision is exactly 2 hours, 27 minutes, 46 seconds, and 24.79 milliseconds long. Enjoy!
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. And we just published a show on Thursday. Yeah. And now we're doing another one. So you guys, sorry for being late on the last one, and now we're early on this one.
Yeah.
It's a very special show. We got special guest GMA, Archer Finley, back in the Tangent Cube with us to give another presentation on his, what is it? This one's going to be...
Learnings on Precision.
All right, Precision. But first, let me introduce our good friend and longhead, Mr. Brett England, from deep beneath his secret space station in secret outer space. You can see him in the dark there, maybe. What's up, buddy? What's going on?
So... I think it's pretty cool that Archer and I have something in common. Our given name is not how we're introduced with the nickname explained. It's GMA. Oh, yeah, by the way, some people call him Archer.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Everybody should just call him GMA. So,
yeah.
Everybody calls you the Watcher, so we're good to go on that. All right, let's go ahead and have space weather news. From spaceweather.com. New cosmic ray data feed on spaceweather.com as solar minimum deepens. Cosmic rays are intensifying. You can now watch the daily change in radiation right here on spaceweather.com. A new data feed displays neutron monitor measurements from the University of Oulu's cosmic ray station in Finland. Radiation levels are now just percentage points away from getting a space age record. Wow. Also, the 2019 transit of Mercury. Mark your calendar on Monday, November 11th. Mercury will pass directly in front of the sun. This rare transit begins at 12:35 UT or 7:35 AM Eastern Standard and lasts for almost 6 hours. Mercury's tiny form, jet black and perfectly round, will glide slowly across the solar disk. People in every continent except Australia can see at least a portion of the crossing. In the USA, the best place to be is on the Atlantic coast, where the entire transit will be visible. On the Pacific coast, the transit will be already in progress at sunrise. Warning! Do not stare at the sun during the transit. Mercury covers a tiny, tiny fraction of the solar disk, so the sun remains as bright as ever. Eye damage can occur. Eclipse glasses will help keep your eyes safe, but they won't help you see Mercury. The planet is only 194th of the sun's apparent diameter. A safely filtered telescope with a magnification of 50x or more is recommended to watch this event. So,
what time does it happen?
It is 7:35 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
So, yeah, it'll be coming over us around 11 or 12, something like that. Or, no, we'll be able to see it till like 11 or 12.
Yeah, right.
Like
Okay. I put it in my calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be 6:35 a.m. Eastern Standard, so the sun may not be up yet when it starts.
Yeah.
We'll be able to watch part of it. Yeah. Were you going to say something on the first one? About radiation levels?
Oh, I was just saying, that doesn't sound good for every living organism on this planet.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't sound good. Space radiation levels are... How's that going for you, Watcher? You got bad space radiation problems up there?
Yeah, it makes the camera jump in and out, but I'm managing.
That's why it's so fuzzy.
Some white noise.
I think I just saw a UFO behind you.
All right, I got one other thing I want to read here before we and Watcher, stay on the line for this. This is an email we got from listener Birch. We've read one of his emails, or maybe two of them before.
Okay.
He was the one that gave you crap for stuff that I do, mispronouncing things. Yeah.
That dirty
Pretty
guy.
sure. Yeah, it's just him. So this is called In Reverse. Hey, Russ and Kyle, I am working on a longer email to y'all, but wanted you both to know that I have listened to all of the Brothers of the Serpent episodes, and I have some comments to make. I ran into a friend of yours in Taos while I was enjoying karaoke night at the only bar here that stays open past 11.
Sounds like one of our friends.
I was wearing the Brothers shirt It is really amazing to see how the network you guys are creating expands. Being a node in that network, the point of view is grand from here, and I thank you. I can't remember the dude's name, but he and his buddy were dressed as the epitome of hipster.
Could have been Chase, maybe, or something like that. I don't know.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out who this guy is. Is it a friend of ours or just a listener of the show? Anyway, he says, we talked for a moment and I got excited about some ancient shit. Granted, I was buzzed. I had been on a period of no drinking, so the sauce was having an effect. Listening to your shows in reverse was interesting in that it was like a time machine. The entrance of the Watcher was massive for me.
See?
I really like the way Brett thinks, too. Don't be so hard on him. Joke. It's funny, and his self-confidence is unshakable.
You can't shake it. You can't shake it, so you got to try.
First time I've heard that.
I know.
actually.
This is why we give him so much crap, because we know that he doesn't even care. It's so awesome. Anyway, he says, here's a poem that simmered up today while I was listening to the latest show. I missed you guys. The poem is, the truth is out there. Fuck you, Mulder. Best. Birch. Anyway, that's a great email. And yeah, I agree, man, about the Watcher. The show was massively increased in quality once we got him on here.
Yeah.
So.
And it's still going to increase in quality once we get the Watcher a better mic.
That's right.
But you actually sound pretty good today.
Yeah,
buddy.
he does sound pretty good today.
You don't sound like you're coming out of a plastic bag or a trash can. But I know
Still in the plastic bag. I just cleaned out all the chips.
that's right. Bag of chips. We do know that you are also in a tin can.
That's right.
Floating in a tin can.
That's right. Far above
But yeah,
the world.
Thanks, Watcher, for all your help keeping us on the straight and narrow.
That's right.
Now mute your mic.
Yeah. He's suggesting that he's suggesting the hipster was Connor.
Yeah, I don't think he was in Towson.
It totally could have been him.
Connor is one of the infamous Snake Bros late night hosts.
That's right.
Making sure you do real science in the tangent cube.
That's
Try to
right.
pull yourself up by your own bootstraps.
Right.
Yeah, that was
Very difficult to do.
I heard you got 70% though.
I got 70%. I get 70% 30% of the time. So.
Yeah. There you go. All right. On to the main topic. We just did a show, so neither one of us have any news stories or. I mean, I have a couple of other emails, but I want to let's go ahead and get into the material you got.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, let's do it. Let me share my Deusk.
Yep.
I'm just going to go and share the video of us.
Yeah. All right. Precision
Precision.
2019.
Yeah, so after our last conversation about giant blocks and the Serapion and all that, I decided to do a deeper dive into basically how do we establish precision today? How did we start to establish precision? Like what is the basis for us being able to say, okay, something is flat or something is square?
Yeah.
And how did we start, and what is the process that we took to get to the point we're at today?
Okay.
And through my studies, I found actually a guy, I'm trying to remember his name right now, but he wrote a book that is pretty much exactly all this stuff.
Oh, all right.
And
What's the book called?
It's called, I think it's called Precision, and then there's like a subtitle like How Engineers Got Us Where We Are Today or something. I can't remember right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I wish I had written it down, but I'm definitely going to pick it up at some point and read it because it looks very interesting. He did a few interviews, and I listened to some of his interviews, and it sounds really interesting. And pretty sure that I basically went through his whole train of thought in the book, just manually doing research.
Nice.
But obviously, there's probably going to be some gaps that I didn't get.
Yeah.
And there's definitely spots in here in doing my research where I went down some pretty deep rabbit holes in trying to figure out, okay, do I need to include this? Is this part of the full story, important to the story?
Yeah.
Or is it something that we can, throw in as a neat thing to talk about without having to put it in the main slideshow or anything
Right.
like that? So there's definitely a lot of like side stuff that I'll bring up while we're talking about it that isn't included. That's just like, oh, and I learned about this. And
Yeah. What was it? You didn't remember the author's name?
I can't
Watcher, I
remember.
think you said the title was Precision.
Yeah, if you type in, I'm sure if you type in precision book, it'll come up.
Yeah. See if we can get that.
But anyways, let's start.
Yeah.
So I just want to add something that this whole topic and you going down this rabbit hole basically how we got to our precision today has implications to the technological advancements of the people, whoever it was that built the stone boxes in the Serapeum and the pyramids and all this kind of stuff. So that's the purpose of like, what did it take for us today to get these standards
to that point,
to where we can even have this tool to take to a box like the Serapeum and see
measure
how
it,
ridiculously accurate it is. So
Hey, are we recording the Zoom?
no.
All right. Well, we're going to start that now. So video should start right now.
All right.
There it is. Good call, Russ.
Good deal.
That would have been terrible to do the whole podcast in this. Damn it. All right.
So yeah, first we'll just go over standard of length first, because that's kind of where I started. It's like, okay, well, first we got to measure things.
Yeah.
How do we start with measuring things? What is the history of that? And so first off, we'll go over the meter. And in 1799 is when they established the meter of the archives, and that's based on 1/10,000,000th of the distance between the pole and the equator along the line that runs between Dunkirk and Barcelona.
Okay.
And in doing my study, I found some references to a previous definition for a meter that involved the length of a string necessary to create a pendulum with a 2-second arc swing. So
that's
a 1
cool.
second half arc swing in time. And so that was the meter, was the length of that string.
Nice.
And I didn't find
That's an
much
interesting-
information on it to really establish that that was actually the case, but
Yeah.
there are some people saying that that's out there.
Wow.
That's really cool. That's a great idea.
Right?
Yeah.
But of course,
Does it change?
You have to have
it's going
time.
to change,
It's gonna change
based on
depending
where you are on the planet.
It will, but also at that point you have to have time.
Yeah,
you have to have
a very good
accurate
way to
time
measure
measurements.
time.
You know?
Yeah,
That's right.
So I didn't even go
And
into
you have to have
time.
precision tools to build a good clock.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Sorry.
I didn't even get into time in this one just because that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they established this as the first meter, and they had a bar cut out that I think it was a brass bar that they made that was the established standard for the meter. And so they're using this standard, and in 1859, Maxwell suggested, okay, we have this sodium lamp now that we can make light with. What if we use the wavelength of that light, because it's constant, it doesn't change.
Okay.
And so that was a very interesting thing to suggest back then,
Yeah.
because as you'll see, we didn't actually start thinking about that seriously for over 100 years later.
Right.
So in 1866, we adopt the metric system, but it's not made obligatory. It's okay. We'll adopt it as our national standard, but you can still use the inch and feet. And
Right. People
the
still
imperial.
complain to us about
Yeah.
that today.
Oh yeah. And
I think it was a great move. But
Yeah.
people will debate you.
yeah. Yeah.
I've got a kicker for you here. So, and then after the meter of the archives, they made a new one in 1889 that was made out of platinum iridium, because it's going to be much more thermally stable than brass will. And so they made a bunch of them, and they sent one to us. And they sent us meter bar 27. I think they might have sent us a few, but this was our standard for the meter from 1889 to 1960.
Wow.
was that bar. That was our standard.
That's
for
cool.
what the meter is. And so after that, in 1960, we redefined it as a multiple of the wavelength of Krypton 86. So finally we catch up to this notion of, okay, we standardize it based off of light and not of a set bar or something, because those can change.
Yeah. Okay. Who made the bar? You said it was sent to us?
The bar was made by the... So the initial standard was developed by the French. The meter of the archives was developed by the French.
Okay.
And then I think the French and the British worked together to I could be wrong, but I think they worked together to develop the platinum iridium.
Okay.
And so then after we finally define it as a standard of light based off of the Krypton 86 wavelength, we then change it to the helium neon laser in 1980, 20 years later. And then 3 years later, they say, okay, no, let's just change that to be a multiple of the speed of light in a vacuum.
Okay, yeah. I knew about that part.
And so that is our standard right now for the meter, is speed of light in a vacuum, a multiple of that. And the reason they went through this progression is because what they found is that has the least deviation. It's the most precise that we've been able to measure it so far. Like the least amount of error is what that 1983 standard gives us for a meter measurement. Now, for what I read is that for experimental means, the 1980 standard of the helium neon laser is more practical to use.
Yeah.
And there's trade-offs there depending on what they're doing, what they're trying to measure.
Isn't there a problem with, if you're trying to measure the speed of light, doesn't that make it an issue if your standard is based on the speed of light? We've talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, it seems kind of like a circular logic kind of thing.
Yeah. Like, how do we know that the speed of light is not changing if we're using the meter to measure it and the meter is based on the speed of light?
Right, exactly, yeah. And that's something I didn't really get a chance to delve into too much as far as like how do we measure speed of light. But what I did figure out is how they initially did it was, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but once they were able to see interference patterns, they're able to count wavelengths, spacing based on that interference pattern. And so because you can measure the wavelength and if you know the frequency of the light, you can measure the speed of it, basically, right?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It's not making sense to me.
Okay.
Kyle, you get it?
Well, if they're able to see the interference pattern, and they know that they know what their wavelength is, they're counting the interference patterns and somehow deducing the speed by that.
So if you know either frequency and wavelength, you can determine velocity. Or if you know if you know two of them, you can determine the third.
Okay, and this is like a mathematical. This is a law?
Yes, it's a mathematical deduction based off of measuring the fringe spacing and determining the wavelength based off that, and then knowing the frequency.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. That if you knew the frequency and the wavelength, you could determine the speed.
Yeah, exactly.
That does make sense.
And so that's how they initially determined the speed of light.
I do get it.
And then there's much more complicated experiments that they've set up since then that I didn't get a chance to really deep dive into.
Yeah. Okay.
But it all comes back to first being able to see those interference patterns.
Yeah.
And then relating that to the wavelength and the frequency, and then getting the velocity from there.
So they're measuring the wavelength using the interference.
Right.
And then because they know the frequency and now they've got the wavelength, they can figure out the speed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Precision is hard.
Precision is hard. And so that takes us to the inch. And the word inch comes from Old English for inch or yints. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it's also the Latin root for 1/12 of a Roman foot. Also the source for an ounce, which is what? 1/12 of
1/16 of a pound.
1/16 of a pound.
Yeah.
But in fluid ounces, is there something for 12? Not because
I don't
a
know.
cup is 8 ounces, right? And
Yes.
a pint is 16. So what's in between a cup and a pint? I don't know. But anyway, so it originally came from 1/12 of a Roman foot, and which is what we have today. It's 1/12 of a foot, right?
Yeah.
And so in 1150, King David said an inch is the breadth of a man's thumb at the base of his nail,
Okay.
which on my thumb is approximately 7/8 of an inch, 3/4 of 7/8 of an inch. If I flatten it down real good, it gets out to an inch. But
Did you measure this with calipers?
I just pushed it against the ruler.
Okay.
He's got
How very
Real
unscientific.
scientific.
Ow.
Ow, ow. And so you can see, like, every guy's got a different size thumb.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have a real problem standardizing with that.
Right.
And so they ran into that, obviously. And so in 1324, King Edward II defined the inch as 3 grains of barley, dry and round, placed end to end lengthwise.
So, but you would probably have the same problem there, right? I mean, they're going to
So
be.
you'd have to average out barley corns until you
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
3 that are like, these are the average barley corns. And so they continued using this for a long time
Oh, wow.
as the standard. That's 500 years almost. Like, that's crazy.
That is a long time.
And really what the kicker was at the end of this was in 1930, the Brits defined the inch as 25.4 millimeters.
Huh.
So the inch is standardized
to the
to
meter.
the meter. So if someone complains to you about using inches, just tell them that it's the same thing. You just multiply by 25.4.
All right.
Because it is the same thing.
Yeah.
At this point.
That's cool.
So yeah, at this point the inch is just an antiquated system that we still use for no good reason except because we like to use it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what you're using as long as it's reproducible and
Yeah.
Yeah, as a
consistent.
standard. Like
As
you
a
can have a
standard.
standard that's reproducible.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter if it's a foot or meter or angstrom or
Right.
cubit or whatever. As long as you can get it right every time, that's what's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that because you can derive the foot from that complicated. I've shown you this before.
Yeah, and so I looked into that a little bit, so with that, it was something about using the mean nautical mile instead of the 5,280 feet.
Uh-huh.
I think the mean nautical mile is 6,000 feet.
Yeah. It's
And
close
if you
to that,
use that, you get within a certain percentage, like out to like 3 or 5 decimals,
Yeah.
to a closer approximation for the inch.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting because it's taking into account the rotation of the Earth and
Yeah.
all this other celestial movement.
Right.
And it gets pretty close to the actual measurement of an inch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like the old system. I'm not talking about not having a standardized one where it's everybody's thumb, or everybody's foot,
Yeah.
but it is pretty close. So if you're not doing, like, say if you're traveling in the woods, of course, if you knew what your pace was in meters, roughly, you could also count your steps
Yeah.
or whatever. But it's kind of, based on the size of the human body.
Yeah.
So it does become a good field standard
Yeah.
for yourself.
For horseshoes and hand grenades, it works great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also personal to you. So if you continue to use it, it's going to be, you are the standard.
Right. Right.
You don't need to reproduce another one of yourselves for
yeah,
other
like
people.
I know. Okay, that's about an inch.
Yeah.
That's-
That's what I'm saying. So, but yeah, when we're trying to have like standardized things across entire civilization or whatever, then obviously you want something better than that.
right. And that's where the kicker is like when you get to the point where you have to have interchangeable parts.
Yes.
That's where you need standards.
Yeah.
Because
Once you get modular things are interchangeable.
the 1-inch widget you made with your thumb doesn't fit in my digit because the widget is too big.
Yeah, especially if it's a Neff thumb.
Yeah, a Neff thumb.
Yeah.
Could be huge.
Yeah. It's like 3.5 inches wide. You have a problem.
No, it's only one.
It's only 1 inch.
That's all right.
So, yeah, I found this interesting diagram that kind of shows, on the right you have the scale of micrometer all the way up to kilometer, and you can see all the different inch and imperial standards that they had and what they were in relation to each other. So,
Wow.
like, a finger is 7/8 of an inch, which my thumb is 7/8 of an inch.
Yeah.
Technically, right? So, but that finger is definitely not 7/8 of an inch. So it's funny. Okay, how do you get a finger that is just 7/8? But then you see the barley corn up there.
Here, back up behind that mic there,
Sorry.
buddy.
Yeah.
And then you see the barley corn up there. So 3 of those equals 1 inch.
Yeah.
And then 2 inches equals a stick. And 2 sticks equals a hand. 3 hands equals a foot.
Yeah.
So, and then there's all these like shaftment, pace. You have link and cubit, span, nail, digit. And then you have all the way up, going up to skein, Roman mile. You leave a league, a mile, a nautical mile. Very interesting diagram. To see,
Yeah.
like all of it laid out.
Ramsden's chain.
Right? What is Ramsden's chain? Here is my standard.
That's right.
Ramsden's chain.
Ramsden's chain. That's really cool.
So yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like all these different measurements that people have been using.
A league.
League. And a furlong.
And I see the L there on the left.
Yeah. So why is it, why do we use league for sports? I wonder if that has something to do with stadium sizes or something. Because a stadia is also, it's an ancient Greek, it's like 608 feet.
Oh, okay.
1 stadia.
2 football fields or something like
Yeah.
that. Okay.
It was the size of the stadium.
Yeah.
They would build one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was their standard.
Yeah.
Stadia. One
That's-
stadia.
Right. One
That's
chain
what
is
you're
equal to imperial U.S. units of 22 yards.
The chain is a unit of length equal to 66 feet.
Ah.
It is subdivided into 100 links or 4 rods.
There are 10 chains
in
in
a furlong, 80 chains in 1 statute.
Gunter's chain, also known as Gunter's measurement, is a distance measuring device used for surveying. It was designed and introduced in 1620 by English clergyman and mathematician Edmund Gunter. It enabled plots of land to be accurately surveyed and plotted for legal and commercial purposes. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can pull a chain tight. That's one thing
Yeah.
about...
And it'll give you a pretty good, accurate
Yeah.
measurement because it's going to be the same every time.
Right. No matter how tight you pull it, it's not going to stretch. I mean, unless you're using hydraulics.
That's some serious come-alongs.
Yeah.
And some serious trees.
Serious trees and serious come-alongs.
That's right.
So yeah, now we can kind of go into a history of precision tools themselves and talk about, okay, now that we have these measurements, what do we use to do those measurements, and what have we been doing that with since history?
Yeah.
And it goes way back. It's pretty fascinating.
Cool. Well, we're getting close to a break here, so let's just
Yeah, this is a
you
good
want to say
spot
that?
to-
Yeah,
this is a
it's
good spot to break.
You got anything else to say? I think this is really
Yeah.
awesome. This is really cool.
How do they make blocks flat, GMA?
We'll get to that. Don't worry, I scratched my head on that one for like 3 weeks.
My standard is 1 snake. And welcome back, folks. Just scratching the level surface of precision with GMA and the Tangent Cube of Science. and some beers and some fine tobacco products.
That's right.
Once again, thanks to Scotty for starting a revolution out here in Texas on the tobacco front.
That's right.
It's a new day.
It is a new day.
Many Snake Bros have been buying pipes after this.
That's right.
Piping up.
And hey, like Archer's been bringing
Fine tobaccos
from the tobacco store, and
keeping it in jars, just like good old David told us to do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So we're testing them out, and it's quite a pleasurable experience.
Yeah.
So, thanks, buddy. Everyone.
Yeah, where's mine? Is it in that box?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll grab it for you.
All right.
It's right behind me. I'll get it.
Yeah, you can get it.
Oh.
All right. Let's get back to this. History of precision tools.
Oh yeah. So, let me make sure I'm clicking on the right thing. Okay.
We are still sharing a tamper, though. That's
Oh, that's a no-no. That's a big no-no. So yeah, obviously the first thing I'm going to start with is rulers, because it's just the most basic measuring tool. String or a ruler or anything like that to measure length.
Yeah.
And the oldest known measurement standard was the Nippur cubit rod, found around the Euphrates River, and it dates from around 2650 BC. And
Oh wow, look at that thing.
yeah, it's pretty sweet looking, and it's neat because they've actually set out the equivalent foot and finger measurements in there too, based on the lines that they found on the rod. And I think the thing is about 4 feet long. Yeah, it's about 4 feet long.
Wow.
And that's the oldest dated one, if I'm correct. And they found some other ones around that area and also in India. And I don't know as much as far as the dating of the other ones. It's in that time period.
It's in that range.
Yeah, so the Mohenjo-Daro ruler was somewhere in that 3000 to 1500 BC range.
Okay, yeah.
And it was very accurate, with subdivisions precise to 5/1000ths of an inch.
Holy crap. Wow.
Which is
How?
pretty crazy for a ruler that's what, like 3,500 to 5,000 years old? Like, that's pretty crazy. How did they establish something that accurate?
Yeah.
To 5/1000ths of an inch.
Tell us.
Like that's twice the thickness of a human hair.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I've heard that they found a ruler there. I didn't know that it had that much accuracy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, of course, the Chinese have always been very technologically advanced.
Yes.
As far as a culture. Here's a bronze ruler from the Han Dynasty. What they say, excavated in Xichang County. I'm probably saying that absolutely wrong. But
Xichang.
What's
That sounds
also
good.
interesting to note about this ruler is it's also a square.
Yeah.
And
So they got the 90 degrees.
They not only understood the idea of the rule, but then also the 90-degree part of that.
Yeah.
Where you needed a reference for 90 degrees as well.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious how they established that 90 degrees. I have my thoughts, and we'll get to that here in a little bit.
There is geometric ways to do it.
There is.
Yeah, okay,
We'll talk
all right,
about
cool.
that. Yeah. And I mean, these are the rulers we use today. They haven't changed much. The one on the left is your standard school ruler. Everyone uses one in school. They're not very precise, but they're good enough for what you need to do in school. The one on the right is a Starrett machinist ruler. They're of the same precision as far as the lineations marked on the ruler. There's the only difference is that the Starrett is going to be more accurate as far as your straight edge, and it's going to be certified, right? You don't need to give a bunch of kids certified rulers. Like, as long as it's within a 32nd of an inch, you're good, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think, like, way back when people were using rulers, we're still using rulers, but even though kids and adults use rulers, we still separate those out to where we're not giving kids a really, really accurate, special, fancy ruler because they'll beat it up.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have something you're using as a real standard being mistreated or messed up or whatever. But we still want kids to learn how to use a ruler, and so here's the one you can beat up and not worry. And so, of course, the natural progression from the ruler, after the ruler is the caliper, and we'll get to that. But I wanted to kind of do this in order of dating a little bit.
Okay.
And after the ruler, we have the lathe. And the lathe is a very, very, very important tool for us today, and it was very important for them back then. And the earliest evidence dates back to Egypt, around 1300 BC, and that's a hieroglyph or carving of it. Not a hieroglyph, sorry.
High relief carving.
High relief carving.
Yeah.
Of two men or two people using a lathe. And you can see one guy is using a rope to turn the piece.
Yeah, and the other one has
the other
tools.
guy's using the tool to cut the piece. And there's evidence of another early lathe found in Mycenae, Greece. Is that right? Mycenae.
Mycenae, yeah.
Where it was a lathed bowl of wood, and their carbon dating for that bowl was between 1100 or 1400 to 1100 BC, which is pretty crazy. Like they understood that the idea of spinning something could give you concentricity around it if you're trying to cut it. So it would allow you to cut a more perfect circle versus trying to freehand cut something.
Mm-hmm.
And
what were they cutting it with? Do you know?
I have no idea. I'm assuming stone tools, or if you ask an Egyptologist, copper chisels.
Copper chisels.
Copper chisel will do it with wood.
It will.
With wood, it'll do it. Yeah, no problem. The only problem is when you start seeing, evidence of lathing and stone stuff.
Right. Which
Like
all
that.
those vases.
Vases.
They found. Where did they find
that
those?
crazy bowl?
Under a pyramid.
Yeah, beneath the red pyramid, I think. Dasher, or maybe it's the bent pyramid. Could be that one.
And so the Romans took this and improved upon it by adding the bow. And so that instead of a guy just sitting there going back and forth with a string, you actually have mechanical advantage with moving that. Now the problem still with these designs is you're having to reciprocate the rotational movement.
Right.
Yeah, you got to go back.
So you're going back and forth.
Yeah.
And so unless if you don't want to mess up, you're going to have to remove your tool
And then reverse it.
Or
Flip the tool over.
Or flip the tool over, yeah. But
Or
you
you
got to do it real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to have your timing just right.
Yeah.
So you're going to need a third guy going doom, doom.
Yeah, playing the metronome.
Yeah.
Doom. Okay, here we go. Flip it. Flip it. And so, the Romans were using this to cut table legs and spear shafts and all kinds of stuff. And, obviously people were doing this a lot longer or previous to this with pottery as well, with the potter's wheel.
Yeah.
You have the same kind of inscriptions in Egypt of people using what looks like a foot moved potter's wheel. And so that's taking the lathe and just turning it vertically, right?
Yeah.
And so that idea obviously has been around for a long time. That idea of spinning something to shape.
Yeah, I guess you're right. The simplest lathe would be a potter's wheel.
No, but they didn't have the wheel, man. It must have been a square. It was a potter's square.
Potter's square, yeah. Potter's square.
That's right.
You really got to work that one
Yeah.
to spin it. Great legs. That guy has great legs.
Gotta make sure you're
just one.
Just one great leg.
Got one massive
calf. Oh, that guy runs.
That's
Yeah, it is interesting though that you can, if they were using these, this technology in ancient Egypt to spin the potter's wheel. Why wouldn't that translate to rolling that wheel on the ground or the axle? Because you have to have the axle.
Right.
Right? The shaft between the two wheels, the one wheel's on the bottom, you're spinning that one with your leg.
Right.
The other wheels, the tabletop is on the other side of the shaft. So it's when you want to move that thing, you lay it on its side and roll it. And I mean, it should be obvious that like, hey, this is a great way to transport something.
Right. It doesn't make any sense that they would have a potter's wheel or a lathe, but not have any concept of the wheel as a transportation method.
Right.
That doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
And then, of course, our great friend Leonardo da Vinci came up with his design circa 1500, which was a foot-driven, pedal-driven lathe that used, actually, he incorporated a flywheel.
Yeah, I was going to say.
As well to
conserve momentum.
Conserve momentum, yeah. So that when you plunge your tool in, the piece doesn't slow down. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And here's a picture of a woman in the 40s during the World War II era working on a giant lathe. Not a giant one, but a good-sized lathe at a machine factory somewhere here in the U.S.
This is a Rosie?
This is a Rosie, yeah. And you can see, let's see here, she's got some block there that I think she's boring a hole in.
Yeah. She's wheeling it in.
Yeah, she's wheeling it up to the...
Yeah.
And in this case, it looks like because typically with a lathe, you're rotating the piece and the cutting
is stationary.
tool is stationary.
In this case,
but in this case, it looks like she's flipped it to where the piece is stationary and she's moving the cutting tool.
Yeah.
No safety glasses.
No safety glasses.
But
at least she's got short sleeves.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
She's got a nice jaunty position of her hat there.
That's cool.
She's very stylish.
Really in command.
Yeah. This colorized.
I just really like that picture.
Yeah, it is really cool.
Here's our lathe at work. This is our friendly Grizzly G4003G. It's a gunsmithing lathe, and it's got I think it's got a 12-inch circumference diameter, work diameter, and a 36-inch long bed. So we can.
This is for machining aluminum.
Anything. You can put steel. You can put anything. It depends on the cutter you're using, right?
But it's a metal one, not
it's
for
a
wood.
metal lathe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so
that's what I meant. Yeah.
You can put a piece of wood on it.
You put a piece of wood on it.
Oh, it'll take care of wood, no problem. This thing is terrifying to operate.
Yeah, I've seen it in operation.
Oh, yeah.
It's
and you have
terrifying.
A piece that's spinning there going anywhere between 200 and 1,700 RPM.
Yeah.
And you don't want any loose clothing. You don't want any loose hair. You don't want anything anywhere near that thing when it's spinning, because if it grabs you, you're gone before you know it.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to stop.
Right.
It's just going to keep going.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
It's absolutely terrifying.
I would not want to be in the building when you actually have a 12-inch diameter, 36
something
inch.
going. Yeah, no, that'd be terrifying. No.
Get me out of here.
No.
Yeah, we used to have to do that at Dynatorque all the time. We had a metal lathe there.
Yeah.
And I had to use it. And then, of course, the thing we were building was a giant lathe.
Yeah. Using a small lathe to make a giant lathe.
Yeah. And then you run it up against the pipe, and it's not going fast. If it was going fast enough, the cutting face, the big plate, and it was also a flywheel. Mm-hmm. The plate with the circular plate that all the tools were mounted on was usually 3 to 4 feet in diameter. And it was steel that was 2 inches or 3 inches thick. And once that thing got going, it was going fast enough where if it grabbed you, it'd throw you across the room.
Yeah.
But it isn't going to pull you in.
This will just pull you in.
It will hurl you across the room. But what was scary with ours is that as it began to cut, the cutting tools would be cutting onto that pipe, and it would start these ribbons of metal.
Oh, the chips, yeah.
Yeah. And they come off, and every single part of it is a razor edge.
Razor sharp.
And it's slinging it way up in the air, and they're 30 or 40 feet long, and they're going...
It's creating a giant pile of razor sharp, basically steel wire.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, I wrote the little safety training thing for work for using this thing, and you have to go like read through my whole little spiel and watch some videos before you use it. And I put some scary videos in there just to remind people like this thing is not a toy. Don't treat it like a toy.
Yeah.
But it's fun to use. It's I was able to level this one out to where I'm cutting within like 3 or 4 10,000ths of an inch.
Wow.
On my diameters, full length.
Wow.
Which is fantastic.
Does it have a vacuum or something to pull in or do you just have to clean up?
No, it's just got a chip tray underneath,
okay.
A coolant and chip collection tray underneath, and you just vacuum it up.
Okay.
You don't want to use compressed air because it can blow debris under the ways and start messing up your sliding surfaces.
Yeah.
So you just vacuum it up, and it's great if you need to drill a hole or open up a hole or make something round or make something really round.
Yeah.
And really the lathe is what allowed people to really start looking at, one method of establishing a quick right angle, because you can lay the cylinder and then you cup in the face of that cylinder and the edges and the side of that cylinder are going to be very close to right angle.
Yeah.
And so that's a good way to establish a quick, good reference right angle if you don't have one.
So you lay the cylinder on a flat surface, and the end of it that you've made the cup on is the right angle off of that flat surface.
Or you stand it up,
you stand it up, okay,
either way,
like a column. Yeah.
So very fun tool to use, but also terrifying and exhilarating. But again, this is
Make me a pipe.
What allows us to start establishing like precision stuff, right? You can start cutting concentric circles, and you can start making things that are right angle, and you can, it's towards this progression of getting closer and closer to more precise machining.
Yeah, right? Like perfectly replaceable parts in a precision
exactly. Yeah. And what part of what makes that possible is our ability to measure. So like in this example, you can see our digital readout up on the top left, and that allows us to get within 10,000th of an inch.
Yeah.
For reproducibility. So instead of having to go and obviously if you're manufacturing parts that have to meet a spec, you're measuring them as you're making them and checking that they're always in spec. But it gives us an ability to go and make a quick part, and just based off of the dial gauges on our readout, we know that, okay, that's good enough for what I need. I don't need to go measure anything. And it's a good quick reference that, obviously Leonardo da Vinci didn't have on his lathe. Yeah. And so...
And that Rosie the Riveter didn't have on hers.
No, she was doing everything with a dial micrometer.
Yeah.
A dial calipers and a micrometer.
Yeah.
Manually taking measurements. So, but people still do that today. It's done all over the place.
Yeah, many machine shops still use that.
And so...
Oh, that's cool.
Next is calipers. And calipers come in all forms. You have calipers that give you measurements and calipers that just give you a reference, right? And so the earliest ones were found off of Giglio, a Greek wreck, off of Giglio Island, or I'm not sure where Giglio is off of the Greek coast. But
Watcher. Where's Giglio?
Figure that out, Watcher. But they date from around the 6th century, and they're basically reference calipers. So you size them out to something you want to compare to something else as a reference. And this is not the actual picture of them. I could not find the actual picture of the
That's really
calipers,
ingenious.
But this is a reproduction, I believe. Right?
Yeah.
And you have a central fixating point.
Yeah, I see how it works. It's just genius.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And so we've been using calipers as a standard of gauging things for a long time. Like the Chinese and the Han Dynasty had actual...
Watcher says Giglio is an Italian island.
Italian island, okay.
Thanks,
I think
Watcher.
it was a Greek wreck off of an Italian island. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. And these are fascinating. These have finger holes in them, and it almost looks like they have numerical graduations in some places. It's hard to tell from the pictures.
Yeah, I see that.
But these are very close to what you see in a modern caliper.
Yeah, it looks like there's sort of like teeth on that edge right there that would give you your measurement markings or whatever.
Yeah, use your mouse pointer to show, because ours won't show up on. There you go.
Along here, yeah, there appear to be graduations or some kind of
that's cool
demarcation there. And this is 2,000 years ago, and you're not going to find much difference between that and a modern day caliper, which is
really cool,
fascinating. And those were made out of bronze.
Bronze, yeah.
And these, what's interesting is they all included an inscription of the day, month, and year of manufacture. So they were keeping track of these things, like serializing them.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
They knew that they had to keep track of these things. Oh, you're
you're using one.
You're using the 190 BC caliper. No, we're on 180 now.
Get yourself a new set of calipers,
That's
Jansen.
Right. Here's a 2,000 years old. And so, I mean, you look, there's my calipers at home.
Yeah.
No finger hole.
No finger hole.
Not as cool.
Yeah.
Not as cool. And so these are just a pair of regular Vernier calipers. They have dial calipers where you have a big dial on there. They have digital calipers. You can go to Harbor Freight and buy yourself a cheap pair of digital calipers, and they do fine. Nothing wrong with them. I like the Vernier just because.
I have a set of that too.
I just like using it.
Yeah.
I don't know. And you don't have to worry about getting them greasy. You can get like grease or coolant in the dial calipers, the electronic ones, and they just
quit
working. These will never quit working.
Yeah.
I love them. My Brown Sharps. Use them all the time.
Brown Sharp 577.
That's right. And I mean, if you go back, look at that.
Yeah.
Like,
you just need to add yourself a finger hole.
I know. All I'm missing is the finger hole. At least I got a little.
You got a little wheel there.
Yeah,
thumb grab.
You got the
there.
thumb wheel. Yeah.
So, but obviously nothing's changed really in 2,000 years as far as what we're doing with calipers. And then to improve upon those, we had the introduction of the Vernier scale, which I was just talking about in 1631.
That's how you say that? Vernier?
Vernier, yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Vernier.
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 It looks like the Vernier scale.
Yeah. And so, it was really interesting to actually learn how it worked because I didn't have a grasp. I knew how to use a Vernier scale, but I didn't have a grasp of how they actually came up with how it works. And so these small graduations are a 0.9x scale of the large graduations. And so when you move, it's going to be really hard to describe here, but basically, when one of these lines up with the major graduation, that's the declination for, or that's the marking for the sub measurement within here.
Okay.
And it's going to be really hard to describe.
I see how it's working. I see that.
Basically, if you were to move this scale so that this first line lined up here, this first line here, because that's 0 right there.
Yeah.
But if this first line lines up past this first indicator line right here, sorry, my touchpad isn't working. So once this line lines up with the first line, then you know you're 0.1 off because you have 9/10 scale. So you still have that 0.1 remaining at the end.
Yeah.
And so as you move up, that 0.1 gets larger and larger and larger, but the other side gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so you're able to accurately measure the distance in between these 2 points because these line up as fractions.
Yeah, like 1/10 smaller.
Right, 1/10 smaller, 2/10 smaller, 3/10
3
smaller,
tenths,
4/10 smaller,
yeah,
5/10 smaller. Yeah,
gotcha.
So as you move through that first range, you're going through 1/10 smaller, 2/10 smaller, 3/10 smaller, 4/10 smaller, all the way up.
So if you had an object that you were trying to measure and it ended between 2 and 3, but it was not right on one of those main marker lines.
Right. So
you could take this bottom scale and make it line up somewhere, and then count your tenths until you find a place where it actually lines up really closely with the object you're measuring, and know how many tenths of the difference it is.
Yeah. So you can, when you close the calipers up and you got your measurement, say right here. So you're looking at this and you say, okay, I'm at 2.1. That's where my 0 scale is showing, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm in between 2.1 and 2.2.
Yeah.
Right.
And then this is going to be 2.11, 2.12, 2.13. And because that's the one that's lining up with the scale, see how all these
It's
other
showing
ones
you
are
it's
shifted?
2.14
Yeah.
is basically what it is.
No,
or 3, because you're starting at 0.
Starting at 0. But see how all these other lines are shifted off of it?
Yes.
So those aren't on.
Right.
So you're on the 3. So you're at 2.13.
Okay, I did not know that.
Okay, I see. I see what you mean.
Because each of these is a tenth.
Right.
Of that.
So you make them both line up to your measurement, and then you just count the bottom ones to figure out what point you're at.
For the subdivision.
Got it. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Whichever one is lining up is your
Yeah.
minor subdivision, basically. And this was originally conceived to help with precision angle measurements for astronomy, for sextants, for all that.
Yeah.
So you could get smaller than degrees. You can get into minutes and seconds.
Yeah.
So like on the right here,
Yeah.
this one's going to be even harder, but you see you have...
Yeah. Let's
we
get
got
the
it.
idea, right? You
Yeah.
get the idea.
The same thing is happening in there somehow.
Exactly.
All
Well,
right, we
and
got it.
so what you have 60 minutes to a degree and 60 seconds to a minute.
Right.
And so here you have 30 seconds on either side.
Yeah.
Sorry, 30 minutes on either side.
Yeah.
And so their spacing in these is 1/31th, not 1/32nd. So you're off by that one little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And so once one of those lines lines up, so right here the 10 is lined up. You
Yeah.
see that?
Yep.
That's what tells
So
you where your individual.
So you'd have to count down to so you're like 9/31ths different from the.
basically something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So I have this old
hard to
Mariner's.
wrap your brain
I have an old
around.
Mariner's compass that actually has this thing on it. I'm just like, WTF is that? I've never tried to.
I'll show
figure
you
it out.
how to read it. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. All right,
Yeah,
thanks.
It's cool. But yeah, this allowed them to go from just making degree measurements to making reproducible minute and second measurements because they could go to those smaller delineations in there.
Cool. Watcher, yeah. If we need to, we can swap screen share if you find something we need to see. So anyway, keep going.
Cool. And so we get to the micrometer. And this was another invention from astronomy. And it was originally invented in 1638 by William Gascoigne, I think it's pronounced. And he was using it to measure the distance between stars, or the angular displacement between stars, and also the relative size of objects in the sky. And because he had a lathe, he could make screws, and the screws have a known thread pitch. So every turn of the screw is a known movement amount.
Yeah.
And so by deducing the distance he was moving based on the threads he moved, he could then deduce the amount he moved in the sky with his telescope.
Yeah.
And then calculate distances between bodies and all that.
That's cool.
And so, yeah, this was the first time someone had used screws to make a precise measurement of something, where they're using it to displace.
Yeah. That's the first time, or the first known.
First known that I could find.
Okay, yeah, first recorded application.
If anyone else finds a better one, please let me know. And then
Get a hold of GMA at gma@snakebro.com.
and in 1772, James Watt improved on this with the invention of the tabletop micrometer. And his is the one on the left. That's the original. And someone has made a beautiful reproduction on the
gorgeous. Right. Yeah.
James Watt also
can barely see it. It's so shiny.
It's so shiny. You see the table in the reflection. It's beautiful. Yeah. It's like, oh my God. And again, you have a screw thread underneath here, and as you turn the large dial, it's geared to turn a smaller dial, which is then geared to turn the screw thread. And so multiplying the gear ratios and the screw thread gives you the turns. The movement per turn of the large dial.
And you can see he's got the marks all the way around. So you're now subdividing that one turn into a bunch of tiny little degrees.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that changed a lot of things right there.
Genius, Johns.
And here's some pictures of people using micrometers. Some are ridiculous, like that thing right there.
Volunteer.
He looks very happy to be volunteering. These guys are measuring some giant, maybe a caliper, so some giant disc, some brake disc or something. I don't know. But you can see that giant micrometer they're using, where it takes two people to use it.
Right.
And the thing is hanging from a rope. Gauge R&R right there.
Yeah.
And she's using a micrometer to measure the diameter of this shaft that's been machined. And you can see it goes, that's a pretty large micrometer as well.
Yeah. And I guess you could run it up and down the thing to make sure that it...
Yeah, and what she would do, and what any machinist would do if they're doing a shaft like that, is you're going to check it
as the
at
tool
90
is passing.
degrees.
Oh, okay.
You're going to check it at 90 degrees to ensure circularity and you're not oblong or anything.
Yeah.
And you're going to check at the length of it too.
Right.
So you're basically taking crosshair sections all the way down the shaft. Oh no, did I not include my picture?
Volunteer has wrench.
Yeah, volunteer has wrench. I meant to. Let me see here. I thought I put that in there. I thought I had another picture. I had some of my micrometers in there, but anyways. So going on from the micrometer, now with the micrometer, we're able to measure things
across the surface,
or thickness, or establish some reference for the thickness of something. And so from there, you can start establishing, okay, if we pile a bunch of those up, we have a reference for, okay, here's a meter, or here's an inch, or whatever. So we're starting to get more accurate with being able to make these tiny measurements, right?
All right. This is a plate. Okay, let's take a break.
You want to take a break?
Yeah.
All right.
Take a break and come back, and we'll get into surfaces and precision. This is awesome.
Yeah, man.
Snacks! And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, brothers of the Serpent podcast. We are discussing precision tools, precision measurements. This is a good thing for us to know because we need to know how precisely wrong we are on almost everything we talk about.
Have we established a wrongness standard?
Yeah, I need a give me some precision measurements on wrongness.
Hey man, you got your G wrenches laid down backwards.
Those are my P wrenches, bro. My G wrenches are the other set. I found my sorry, what?
No, go ahead.
I just found my picture of my micrometers at home.
Oh, okay. Those are your micrometers.
These are mine in my garage. From left to right, it's a 1, a 2, and a 3-inch micrometer. And these have a vernier on them as well, so you can graduate down to micrometers, basically. And on the bottom, you can see there's a circle, a little donut-shaped guy right here, and also a rod, and these are a 1-inch and a 2-inch standard. And so you use these to calibrate your micrometer.
Okay.
And so what you'll do is you'll put the disc or the rod inside the micrometer in between the measuring post and the stop point. And you'll close the micrometer up to match that standard. And then they give you a little wrench which fits in the side of the micrometer barrel, and you rotate the barrel to bring it to 0 for that standard. And so
what are the markings on the first two, and why doesn't the third one have
so
it?
these markings are actually
Conversion tables or
decimal
something?
to fractional equivalents.
Okay.
Conversion tables.
So
yeah.
it's a reference.
It's a reference, yeah.
All right.
So they give you little conversion tables on the side there. And actually, this one has some scratchings on it from, I think the previous owner had written his name on it or engraved his name or something on it. I got them off eBay used. And also Brown and Sharp. They work great. Never have any problems with them. Great tools to have for when you got to measure something really small. And it's interesting because really small, we're talking about really small, as in a piece of dust will mess your measurement up.
Got to clean your
You
micrometer.
got to clean every surface before you measure it. Because a little piece of hair or a piece of dust or anything will throw your measurement off.
Wow.
A great tool to have. Very simple.
I assume they make digital ones too.
Micrometers, I would think so. I've never seen a digital micrometer,
Okay.
but maybe. I would
So
assume
what's the benefit of using one of these instead of calipers?
So these, because they're using a screw thread, a known screw thread, they'll be much more precise
Okay,
than
all right.
calipers. So calipers you can get down to, you can get down to two decimal places on your metric measurement. So 2 point something millimeters or whatever. These you'll go down into the actual micrometers with.
Okay.
So much more accurate, or much more fine measurement than a caliper will do.
All right.
And so now we get to surface plates, and I scratched my head on this concept for a while. I had like recurring dreams about flatness and how is this established? What is going on with this? Like, how did they come up with all this? And so the surface plate originated from Henry Maudslay around 1800, and it was originally a cast iron plate or a pair or 3 plates that were scraped and rubbed together until they were flat, basically. And so what he would do is you start with a relatively flat surface and rub them together, and you have some ink in between them and on one of the surfaces. And so the ink will imprint the high spots from one surface onto the other.
Yeah.
And so you can see where one needs to be scraped down to match the other surface, right? And that was then perfected by Joseph Whitworth, who I think was an apprentice of Henry Maudslay, because he actually introduced the whole blue ink idea. Before that, Henry Maudslay was just scraping and comparing. And then Whitworth brought in the idea of using the ink to find high spots and bring them down to flatness. And you have two different two main kinds of surface plates are granite and then cast iron. And they have pros and cons for each. Granite's very hard, obviously, but also very heavy. And typically what you'll find is standards for like laboratories or machine shops will be a granite plate. But then when they need to refinish the granite plate, say if there's some wear in it or whatever, they'll use cast iron typically, because they can move the cast iron around on top of the granite.
Okay.
And there's some places that use giant cast iron tables that are scraped flat, and we'll see some examples of that there. But basically, the idea was to establish a flat reference surface.
Yeah.
That is flat along its surface.
So if you take two of these blocks when they're relatively flat and you start scraping them together, is there a specific pattern or method for the scraping that results in both of the surfaces ending up flat
instead of
We'll
being
get to that.
concave?
Okay, because I
That's
was
a
like,
good question. We'll get to that. And it took me a while to figure out like exactly how they do it, how they got to that. Here, we'll keep going. That's next.
aha, this is what I
And
was.
so-
This figure 197 was in my mind.
And so actually the idea is you use 3 plates because with 2, as you can see on the left, you'll end up where one surface is concave and one surface is convex, but they fit
They
together.
fit, yeah.
Right.
And so when you introduce a third surface, then you make also another pair that fit together. But then when you combine the 2
Yeah,
convex ones, they'll grind flat together.
Wow. Okay.
And so basically you go through this process of grinding A to B, A to C, B to C, B to A, C to A, and you keep flipping them until they're flat. And you're
that is some
basically-
granite on granite
that is
action
some
right there,
granite
buddy.
on granite action. Diamond lube, baby.
Diamond lube. Wow.
So yeah, they're basically rubbing 3 stones together with some kind of lapping compound, some kind of polishing compound, not polishing,
What?
but some kind of cutting.
He's
compound.
got 3 stones and he's rubbing them together. Sorry.
It's great. But yeah, you're basically establishing a flat surface because 3 surfaces can't share a common face
Okay.
unless they're all flat.
Wow. That's
Which is basically like a what's the right word for that? Like a axiom, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you can't have 3 surfaces that match unless they're all flat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
wow.
That's right.
And so the same principle applies to right angles. So first you establish a flat surface, and then you start grinding together 2 right angle blocks on that flat surface. And so and I wish I had copied the diagram here. I can try and find it. But it's basically the same thing as you're seeing in figure 197 there, but with right angle plates. And so you start with right angle A and right angle B, and you start rubbing them together. And then you start with B and C. And so eventually...
So you've already established that you've already established the flat surface on the bottom of the right
bottom,
angle thing,
right.
but what's sticking up the 2 may not be so you have to
exactly
have 3 of those
90
again,
degrees.
and you start.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
and so
okay.
you do the same thing with 3 right angles, and bluing them and rubbing them together and finding the high spots and working them down until the bluing matches on all of them, and then you have a flat surface and you have a right angle established.
And you will never end up with that angle being on all 3 being slightly off of right angle.
No, because you have
That's
3
crazy.
blocks. If you only use 2, that would happen. But when you use 3, that other one doesn't match
So
the other 2.
yeah, once again, the only
Yeah.
way they can line that's what
The only
that's
it follows that 3 surface axiom, right?
Well, I was thinking that maybe it will end up being flat, but not necessarily right angle. What?
If you use only 2, then yeah, you will get flat, but not necessarily right angle. But then when you introduce a third, those first 2 are already matched to their angles. So one's, let's say, 83, the other is 97. But then you bring that third unknown block in, it doesn't match those other 2.
Okay.
So as you start working them together, they start matching more and more.
Or even if it matches one, it won't match
it won't
the other.
match
Right.
the other.
Yeah.
yeah. That's crazy that they
Yeah.
all end up being right angles.
They
Awesome.
can't all 3 match unless they're all right angle
Yeah.
and flat.
I think I may have nightmares about this problem.
Oh, dude.
It sounds like I'm going to be dreaming about it.
Oh yeah, I dreamt about it for a while. How do you make it flat? How does it work? Waking up in the middle of the night. Oh, I almost figured it out in my dreams.
Yeah. I know that feeling.
And so this is how we establish flatness. Or a flat surface is with 3 flat surfaces.
That's crazy. It's so simple, but
It's so simple.
not intuitive at
and
first.
very, 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 very squared, time consuming.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
it sounds like it take a lot of time.
a lot of time to do. It's insane. And so they have specifications for surface plates. You have a grade AA, you have a grade A, and a grade B. And the formulas there, it's 40 plus a diagonal of the surface plate squared divided by 25 times
0.000001 inches. Wow.
And so that's grade AA, and then grade A is twice that spec, and grade B is twice the grade A spec. And so this gives us a specification for when something is flat and what grade of flatness it is. So we actually have grades of flatness.
Where are these flatnesses located? And how do we use them?
So the way I understand it is that, like, say you have the NIST, National Institute of Certification Technology, or something like that.
Yeah.
They have 3 surface plates, or they have 1 or 3 surface plates that are considered the standard. And so you'll have a standard, and then you have a reference. Sorry, you have I think it's like you have a standard, a reference, and then a tool plate. And so the main standard is what you compare all your references to make sure your references are all still good.
But you're not actually putting blocks on those and rubbing them together.
Right.
You might make a bowl in the middle of it.
Exactly. It stays in a room covered, lights off, all by itself until you need to check your
temperature
other plates.
control.
Pull a vacuum on the room.
Exactly.
Good grief.
And so that never gets used except to check everything, all your other references, all your other reference plates. And so then you use the reference plates
To check your tool plates.
Check your tool plates.
Yeah.
And it works on down the line from there.
So again, you haven't used 3 flat surfaces.
Yeah. Still using 3 plates.
That's right.
And a system of round robin to ensure that that main reference plate is still correct. And you check it in regards to other laboratory reference plates, master reference plates around the world to make sure, okay, all of our plates are still reading the same.
Yeah.
These are our main reference plates.
So once you get the flat surface, then you can use light, like you can use a laser or something to check the surface. Is that?
So you can use light. You can use a few different things, and we'll go into that.
Okay. All right. I'm jumping the gun here.
That's cool. No, you got great questions.
You can't use lasers to check the flatness because gravity curves light.
And the laser spreads out.
That's right.
But if you can tilt it just right.
Now we have to get a standard for that.
What's your standard laser tilt? I believe it's 0.039 arc seconds. So here's a table from that standard for the grades, the microinch requirements for the different grades, grade AA through grade B. And I just wanted to point something out here that we can tie back into later. But note that the grade AA for a 12 or an 18 by 18 plate is 50 microinches.
Okay.
So just keep that in mind for a little bit. 50 microinches for a 18 by 18 grade AA plate. Here's some guys that are calibrating a surface plate or verifying a surface plate. So they're using what's called an autocollimator to verify that the plate is flat and doesn't have any inconsistencies in the surface. So anything that would cause an angular deflection of that mirror. And I'll go into the workings of an autocollimator here in a little bit. But basically it uses light rays bouncing off a mirror to determine if the mirror and the lens you're looking through are in the same plane.
Has tilted it,
has tilted
or whatever.
It all, yeah. And so what they do is they'll check these blocks in 8 different lines, 3 horizontally, 3 vertically, and then the 2 diagonals.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that gives you an estimation of the overall flatness of the plate.
So that mirror gets run up along that bar?
That straight edge
yeah.
there. Yeah. So they'll move that mirror in and out along that straight edge
to
to
make
see,
sure,
is there any point around here where it dips down
where it dips
or up?
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. That's cool.
And then they'll shift it and do the other diagonal and then all the horizontal and vertical lines too. And that's the same whether it's a 12 by 12 plate or, a 5 foot by 3 foot plate. They have huge ones in certain shops. And so moving from the surface plate, we get to gauge blocks. And these were invented by Carl Edvard Johansson in 1896. And these are also known as Johnson blocks.
Serious?
I'm serious. Johnson blocks.
Oh, man.
And these became the standard for submicron measurements.
See, folks, even a Johnson can do great precision work.
Even a
occasionally
Johnson can change the world. And basically, the history with Carl Johnson is that is that he was an employee in I believe it was a rifle making factory, and they had all these different gauge blocks that they would use for gauging measurements that they were making in the factory. And the problem was that they had thousands of gauge blocks for all these different measurements they wanted to make.
Yeah.
And so he came up with a system where with a set of 111 blocks or something like that, you could make every measurement within a certain range.
Yeah.
Without needing thousands of different blocks.
Right. You just combine.
You combine the blocks you need to get up to the measurement you need to make.
I see. Yeah, that's cool.
And he made the first set in his house. He's like hand grinding them in his house with his wife helping him.
Wow.
And he shows them to his employer, and he's like, "That's brilliant.
Yeah. Good job, Johnson.
Great job, Johnson." And so they started making them.
Nice.
And selling them to people around the world. And
That's awesome.
And these have been the standard. These are still the basic standard in any major machine shop.
Yeah, I kind of want one of those little kits. That looks great.
Oh, they get even cooler. Just wait.
All right.
Because the way that the Johnson blocks work is that you ring them together. W-R-I-N-G, ring. And what that means is that you slide them on top of one another and twist them. And it creates a cohesion between the two blocks because of how flat they are.
Oh, wow.
To where they actually stick together. And it's more than just atmospheric pressure holding them together. There's some atomic
something going on with the metal too, or
I'm not sure if it's the metal or the film of oil in between them, but the ringing gap is approximately 10 to 25 nanometers in between those blocks. And
so is that showing two blocks together with weights
sticking together with 200 pounds?
Holy crap.
And he demonstrated that
it just
at
not
a conference.
It will not pull apart because of the vacuum.
It's not. I don't know if it's vacuum or what it is.
It's because, I'm guessing, but there's a.
I think it's a combination of surface tension and then attraction between
there's a
two
chemical
surfaces.
attraction that happens between
when
the same
they're
metals, and then because they're so flat, there's so
no
much
air
contact
or anything in there.
Yeah, it's so many parts of the blocks can grab onto the other block, and then it won't let go.
And so on the right, that picture there is a whole bunch of blocks.
Yeah,
stuck together,
and he's just holding it like a bar.
Yeah.
Wow, that is pretty amazing.
Is that awesome?
So you would know immediately if your any block was damaged because it wouldn't stick together. It won't ring.
Yeah, and so it's fascinating. I didn't really have an idea that was the case. It's like, oh my god, this is awesome.
Yeah, we got to get some of those.
Yeah,
some Johnson.
And maybe this is how they build pyramids. You know, they make the blocks so flat.
But they just ring them together.
They ring them all together.
So those lids.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
On the Serpent
boxes.
if it's flat enough, you can ring granite together.
Holy shit.
Wow. You heard it here first, folks.
And
Doing it in the past is called rung.
yeah.
When they have been ringed, they are rung.
Rung together.
Rung.
Gauge blocks. That's right. And so,
Is this one of the rabbit holes that you...
the gauge blocks?
Yeah, like you went down and then you were like, should I include all of the physics behind why these blocks stick together in the presentation?
In the presentation? Nah, we'll just talk about it. So here's another instrument that we use for very small, precise measurements. And it's called a linear variable differential transformer. And the way it works is that you have 3 windings around a shaft. And so as the shaft moves in between the 3 windings, the middle winding has an AC source running through it.
Okay.
And because you have a shaft with 2 windings on the outside, that AC source is being induced into the 2 outside shafts.
All right.
But when you move a shaft inside the core, it changes the signals coming off of those 2 outside windings, the induced windings. And so you know your AC source and you see the change in the output on your secondaries.
Then you know the position of the core.
You know the position of the core.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's also cool.
So that allows us to make very, very, very precise measurements electrically.
Okay.
And so you can.
So this is sort of how a digital micrometer might work.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Not a digital caliper, but like if they had a digital micrometer, yeah.
Yeah.
This would be like the equivalent of a digital micrometer, basically, yeah.
LVDT sounds like some kind of crazy drug that you might do.
Sweet party drug, bro. And so I'm going to take it back a little bit because now we start getting into the idea of measuring things with optics.
Okay, yeah. There's an ongoing, I'll just throw this in there. There's an ongoing argument in archaeology about how early did people develop actual optical lenses.
Yeah.
And there's quite a bit of debate because people have found very old, what looked like ground quartz lenses.
Really?
Yeah. Very, 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 very old ones. And like the idea of having actual, just the understanding of how to build a 2-lens system to be able to magnify something far away or close or whatever.
Or even just one lens.
Yeah.
Like the idea of lensing, period.
Yeah. But if you can imagine getting if you had a clear enough piece of quartz and you smoothed it off, that you could sort of magnify just because it's one.
Just get the refractive.
Right. You just got to get it in the right position, and then you might be able to magnify something with that.
Right.
But having a 2-lens system that works, so there's quite a bit of debate on when did
that originate?
Yeah.
Huh. So yeah, starting along the idea of measuring things with optics, we have this idea of Newton's rings, which was
stay up in that mic.
Sorry, it was first mentioned by Robert Hooke in Micrographia in 1665, and he discovered the phenomenon by rubbing 2 sheets of mica together, and the light passing through and hitting the air gap between the 2 pieces of mica causes an interference pattern. When you look.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So you can kind of see that on the left side.
Yeah, I see it.
That's I think that's a bubble, but still you get the same effect from like the oil on the surface of a bubble.
Right.
Or oil on water or anything like that where you have 2 layers of something. And can cause an interference effect. And then Newton further investigated this in optics in his 1704 book, Optics, and found that you could reproduce it using lenses. And by using a flat lens and a concave lens, you can bring them together and see the interference pattern of the light going through the lenses.
Ah.
And so that's what you're seeing on the right there is the interference pattern created by that light going through the lens and splaying out, right? And so taking that one step further, we have the idea of an optical flat.
Okay.
And so you have a piece of glass that has been rubbed together with two other pieces of glass until they're really, really, really flat. And the one on the left, I think, is from Mitutoyo, and it's certified to be 0.1 micrometer across the surface flatness.
It's almost invisible through the
right,
middle.
right.
It's so freaking flat.
So flat.
Yeah, that all you can see is the outside ring. It looks like a paper ring, really.
Yeah.
And the diagram on the right illustrates the concept of how you get the interference pattern from two layers of something stacked on top of each other, right? So you have the same incoming angle of light, but because of the offset angle between the two surfaces, you have
constructive and destructive interference.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we can use this to look at the surface of something and optically determine if it's flat.
That is cool.
And so on the left is an old micrometer that style type of device used to measure concavity of a surface. And so you have a screw that moves up and down in the middle, and these three posts form a plane.
Yeah.
And then you can adjust this till it just touches, and then move it to another surface and see if it touches or if the legs spin or whatever.
Right.
And so on the right is an optical flat being used to determine flatness. And so when you put these two surfaces together, you see the interference lines appear between the two surfaces. And the flatter the two surfaces are, the straighter the interference lines will be. Yeah. And so you can see there's some slight deformity here on this guy, right? And so in this picture, actually, and you can't really see the words here, but
I see that they're doing something with time. Yeah,
it's how long they have been rung together, and so the longer two things are rung together, the more they come in contact with each other.
Yeah,
and you're actually going back to the Johnson blocks. You're not supposed to leave them rung together
because you'll never get them apart.
You'll never get them apart.
Yeah,
because after a certain point, they are together.
They are one thing.
They are one thing.
It is one Johnson block.
Yeah.
So this is
man, that's fascinating.
A bit of an aside, but they did this like the earlier, the first. I know this for the first nuclear bomb. That's how they did this. They made those. They made so you have a sphere of your explosive radioactive material. Something that will become, so you need a certain amount of it to be where it will reach critical mass. Mm-hmm. Critical mass is how much you need before it will explode because of chain reactions, right? Then they cut, so you figure out how much that is, and then you make a sphere of it and cut it in half. Or basically, you basically have to
make
form two hemispheres, and then you make them so freaking flat, and then they put a bunch of tiny little detonators all the way around both spheres, so that when it was to detonate, that all those went off and bam, slam them together, and boom, it goes off because they're so flat that once they come together, it's like one object.
Critical mass, yeah.
Wow.
Wild. But one thing that's interesting about this instrument on the left here is that I saw a video of a guy on YouTube make one with a piece of plywood and 4 screws.
Huh.
And it's accurate to within a few micrometers.
Oh,
until
wow.
it gets moisture or heat and cold. Yeah.
But for a simple for a simple, very precise device for determining if something's concave or convex, it's amazing how simple and precise it can be.
Yeah.
You just have to be able to make screws.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the hard part.
Or you just go to Lowe's.
Well, you already have the lathe before you even get to this point. So, man, the ringing is that's really, really fascinating to me. I'm gonna have to do a little deep dive.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I was thinking I want to try and find an optical flat. Apparently, you can buy them for pretty cheap from overseas. I guess they have a bunch of surplus Russian optical flats you can buy. left over from the USSR. Like they still have the CCCP stamp on them and stuff. Like, yes, I want to buy one of those. So let me see. I think, did I put a picture in here of something that? No, I didn't. But basically, when these two surfaces are not flat, you'll see deformations like this, and if they're really not flat, you'll start seeing the line curve way out here.
Yeah,
you know,
okay,
and start seeing, and really, it's basically like a topography map.
It also seems like the fewer the lines, the more they're rung. Is that the idea there?
Yes. So the more they ring together, the fewer fringes you're going to see.
Right.
And when things are really, really flat, you'll only see one fringe.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that they called it ringing, and when you do it with optics, it actually makes rings out of the out of the interference lines. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Maybe that's where the name came from. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it's spelled with a W.
Yeah, rung.
But these are used to gauge the flatness and squareness of Johnson blocks and any other flat reference you're trying to
That's amazing.
make. And
Looks
these
like
are about the best it gets because it's optical. You're seeing flatness in terms of wavelengths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can actually measure, I'm off by these many wavelengths of flatness.
That's why they're using green and white light. That's why it says white light there on the bottom right.
And typically you'll use monochromatic light.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you start getting these funny color fringes from the red and green overlapping. Yeah.
Wow.
And so following on the optical train, we have the collimator.
We need to take a break.
Are we break time?
Yeah.
I started the Sands of Time late.
Well,
so.
it doesn't matter. I mean, we're only this is a little bit over.
We'll talk about the collimator and we can take a break.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this was invented by Henry Cater in 1825, and it was a method for establishing the horizon and zenith for telescopes.
Okay.
And basically, his invention was a cast iron block with a collimated lens or collimating lens mounted to it that was floating in a pool of mercury. And so it would always be flat, right? It's always level.
It's always going to be flat. Yeah.
And so what they would do is aim the telescope at it from the north side and then flip everything around. Make a note of the inclination of the telescope. Turn everything 180 and do the same thing. And then when you subtract the two angles or add the two angles, you have zenith and horizon.
Okay.
From that measurement. And figure 37 kind of shows that. And so, because you have these two slightly off angles, but they're 180 to each other, they match, right? And so you can use that to determine straight up and straight out.
Right.
From those two.
Wow.
And so from the collimator, we get to the autocollimator, which took that principle and then bounced it back at you using a mirror. And so the mirror... This tells you if the mirror is out of angle in some way. Because if the mirror is straight on, the image will come straight back to you. But if it's tilted up or down, the reflected image will be lower or higher than the original.
Yeah.
Right? And
so you can basically make them merge, or what you're looking at, you're trying to get it in a certain place. Is that the idea?
Right. You're trying to get them to line up. Exactly.
Trying to get them, so they're going to be off, and you adjust something until it perfectly merges, and then it's flat.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so here's a view from the viewfinder of one of those autocollimators, and so it's kind of hard to see here, but this is the actual wires in the viewfinder, and then these are the reflected wires here. And so you can see how they're off there.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that'll give you a
shift it up and shift it over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How off your angle is there.
And how precise is that? Arc seconds? Okay. Yeah.
They get down in the arc seconds.
Yeah, okay.
They get way down there. And
so this is what they're doing, like when we use a transit or something, the lens in the transit has they have to use an autocollimator to
set it
make
up.
sure that when they first put that lens in the telescope, that it's sending the image back
straight
perfectly
on.
straight.
Yeah. And I'm sure
Otherwise
they use
you'd
an
be-
autocollimator to calibrate that thing. Yeah.
That's cool.
Wow.
And we saw one on the surface plate slide. Here, let me go back here. So that's an autocollimator right there.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And so you have the mirror right here, and the guy's going to look in this viewfinder, and that'll tell him.
And he's going to
how
have
flat.
crosshairs, and he's going
He's going to see those crosshairs moving around as
Yeah.
he's sliding that thing
Slide
back
that
and forth.
Yeah. And then he'll be able to even tell, like, okay, this is
What the difference is.
This is a grade A whatever because it doesn't move that much.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's going to move.
Yeah, it'll move.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll go back here.
All right, let's take a break. If we're done with the
let's take a little
collimator.
break.
Yeah. How close are you to the? Because we're at final segment.
Yeah, let me see here. This is the final segment. I just go into modern machines and
Okay.
I just show the 3D printer and other stuff.
All right, cool.
All right. We'll be right back.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe not the final segment. Not sure. G-May's got to get through his presentation here. We're going to go long if we have to. Very precise presentation you have there, G-May.
I'm getting there.
Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so where were we? The accumulator.
The auto accumulator. It's about to go critical.
Frickin' Johnson blocks. I can't believe Johnson blocks. That's the greatest.
Yeah, I really want to get a set now just to play with them.
Yeah.
Well, we can't say that anymore. Like
I know.
we call like we have a meme that says Johnson looking at these blocks that are not.
Yeah.
You know,
they're
we call-
very
Obviously
non-Johnson.
not Johnson blocks.
So when talking about blocks only, they're Johnson blocks if they are ridiculously precisely flat.
Or really, really bad blocks.
Yeah. There's two kinds. Clearly,
gonna
there's
get
two kinds of
confusing.
Johnson.
There's really flat Johnson blocks and really not flat Johnson blocks.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a Monday
Wow.
morning Johnson block.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess now we can kind of talk about where we're at now. What does this allow us to do? And what does this kind of stuff imply for what we talk about all the time?
Yeah.
I mean, what does this mean for the person at home? It means we can do stuff like this at home.
Oh yeah.
This is my 3D printer at home. It's in a wooden box. You can see the box here. It's got a acrylic door on it, so I can see what's going on while it's running. It's got a approximately foot by foot square glass bed that's heated, and it's basically a glorified hot glue gun that you can run different types of plastic through. And it builds things up layer by layer. On the right there, I'm printing. My girlfriend wanted a horn for Halloween costume, so printing some horns.
Wow.
Wow.
Pretty sweet.
That's pretty sweet.
And you can see here, it's actually, so the horn's 3D. It doesn't all lay flat on the surface. So it's actually printing support structure underneath the piece.
That you've been cut off.
That it's printed so that it breaks away afterwards. So it's printed with a very tiny layer of air in between it and the actual piece, so that the connection between is very weak, and you just break it off once you pull the whole thing off.
That's awesome.
That's cool. Talk about how you got this. Your work got a 3D printer.
Yeah, so we bought it was a Taz 5 3D printer, a commercial 3D printer you can buy online. I think they're like the Taz 7 or something like that now. But it is a printer that is made out of 3D printed pieces. And so they've are basically printing 3D printers.
Von Neumann machines.
Basically, yeah. And I looked at it and was like, well, I really want one of these. And I can use one of these to make one of these. So I'm going to do that. And there's a whole online community of people that do this that are just all about it. And people have made modifications to that Taz.
Yeah.
And so I found all the good modifications online that I liked and put them all together and made my own.
I like your color scheme there.
Yeah,
you
good.
I got a real
scheme.
good,
Yeah.
real good color scheme. Looks fancy. And you can actually see one of my very favorite upgrades is this guy right here, which is a little micrometer end stop.
Okay.
So on the commercial versions, they just give you a little, like a thumb screw that you can screw in and out for the stop for when the thing is going down,
motion.
the vertical motion. So there's a switch that when it hits that, it knows it's at the very bottom. And that thumb screw is terrible for adjusting.
Yeah.
Because it rocks back and forth.
Oh,
and
no.
The pitch is terrible on it. And so one guy came up with a mod where you print new bottom brace pieces, these blue pieces here, and there's a little hole for a micrometer to screw up into. And so now I can adjust my height stop point in the micrometer region.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when you're first getting the thing set up and starting to print, the most important thing is that first layer and the squish of the first layer on the plate. And so you actually get a little extra squish on that first layer so you get good adhesion. And that micrometer really helps with dialing in that squish just right, because you're talking about less than half a millimeter in that range that you're working with.
So one thing I love about this 3D printing stuff is they have one on the International Space Station. And so NASA can just email them parts.
Yeah.
Basically.
I need a part.
Yeah. They're
Here's
like, oh,
the file."
this broke. And they just email them, like there's somebody gets the part, builds the file or whatever, and then emails it to them. They print it out and then they use it.
That's
It's
great.
Awesome.
It's more expensive to get them the materials to print with than
Yeah.
it is to get them the part.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's not actually email, whatever it is, however they send them the data.
Yeah.
But yeah.
By secret code.
Yeah.
By secret code.
Send it by a worm.
Yeah, and actually I think this is a video here. So you can actually see it running. And this is what it looks like. It's going through right now, just printing zigzag lines as a layer.
Okay.
on there.
And
So
it moves the plate.
Yeah,
it
the
moves
plate
the
moves
plate,
on one
yeah.
axis.
And okay. That's cool. Wow.
And so the original design had, they used solid cylindrical rods here for this support structure as well as on the vertical. And so one guy came up with this mod to replace them with aluminum extrusion because you actually have a bowing issue in the middle from the rods. You have a sagging issue. And so this eliminates the extrusion is much stiffer and eliminates any of those sagging issues. And it's nifty because they sell these little kits with little rubber wheels that fit perfectly into that little extrusion.
Yeah.
And so you have a linear rail system that fits into the sides of that just rolls smoothly along
Nice.
on little bitty skateboard wheels.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's great for prototyping, or I need a little part in the garage for something.
He actually printed. We have a PA system for the band, and like over the years, we've lost like half the knobs on the front of the PA system, and Archer printed knobs for it. Like he took all his precision tools and he measured the existing knobs that were still on it, and just put them in the 3D printer and printed out a bunch of like
now
neon
we have
green.
these
They're all
green knobs.
neon green. I forgot I got to print a few more of those. But yeah, that was fun because I did a few iterations of it where first it was just checking the general size and making sure it fit on the post. It was like, no, that's a little too tight. Didn't fit on the post right. Let me change that. Oh, well, I'm doing that. I might as well add a little detail to it. Let me add this little ridge on the top and some roughness like the real knob has. So every time I like was fixing an actual problem with the knob, I was also making it look more like the real knob. So by the time I was done, it was like, that looks like the real knob.
Yeah, they look freaking real, except that they're green.
Yeah. They turned out great.
Yeah, they did.
Great.
Great.
But you know,
post those on the internet so that other people can print knobs.
Yeah,
knobs.
exactly.
Yeah.
Samson knobs. I want to crank my Samson.
Yeah.
Oh, did we lose a watcher?
Uh-oh, did we?
Looks like we lost him.
Looks like
I
we
don't think
lost.
so. Maybe.
Yeah, he's been up there and he's not there now.
Yeah, he's gone.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I mean, you know, where we are at with precision today allows us to do this kind of stuff in our garage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like interchangeable parts. I can take one screw out and put another screw in, and it works perfectly fine. I can pull that motor out and put another one in, and it fits just fine. You know, we've gotten to the point.
That's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
The idea of interchangeable parts was just huge. You look at Henry Ford, starting with the manufacturing line we know today for making an automobile and having interchangeable parts. He brought a car to the public,
Right.
whereas Rolls-Royce at the same time was hand making cars.
Yeah.
No one could afford those cars.
Yeah.
You couldn't pay for a Rolls-Royce. They were so expensive.
That's right.
It brought luxury commodity to the masses in a way that we had never seen before.
Yeah. Precision.
Yeah.
That's
It's amazing.
awesome.
But the Rolls Royce people are like, that's ridiculous.
That's
you
ridiculous.
You need to hand whittle the tires. Spelled Tyres.
That's right.
And whittle is
Whittler.
But it's archaeology.
That's right. Archaeology.
So here's another example of, something that's available to consumers that is made possible by these breakthroughs. And this is the CNC mill we have at work. And here on the left, you can see it. This is the main working area right here. This whole outside area is an enclosure and a big stainless, basically tank that I designed that bolts onto this machine table down here and has a whole coolant system built into it, a recycling coolant system. So we put a vat down there with it's basically a sump with a sump pump, and it pumps up through the machine, runs through these lines right here, and squirts lubrication and coolant all over the working area where you're cutting, and then pushes the chips down into a collection area, recycles all the fluid through a 50 micron filter and back through the system again.
Wow.
And so it's run by a computer here, and we'll either program machine runs into the computer itself, or we have CAD software that we can program the tool run based off
the CAD build. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And on the right is our tool rack for the machine, and it's nowhere near full in this picture, but we basically have numbered tools, and so each tool has a programmed offset and size in the machine. And so when you stick that tool in, plug in the number for that tool, it knows that tool's that long, so the zero offset vertically is that far down, and I'm using this diameter and whatever.
Yeah, so you never take the bits out of those tools.
No,
Like once
not
they're tightened,
unless you have to.
Yeah.
You leave
because
them.
then you have to recalibrate
Yeah, exactly.
those.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so we have a flat block that we milled flat with a vertical caliper, digital caliper on it that we stand the tool up on and use the caliper to measure the offset. And then we can dial that in the machine.
That's cool.
So it knows how long that tool is coming down. And
Wait, you didn't make that flat block by rubbing 3 blocks
That's what I was
together?
going to say. Hire Johnson. And have him make
I
a block.
used the machine to make the block. So here's a picture. I was milling a cast iron engine manifold, exhaust manifold here, And you can see here's the coolant lines right here. I'm actually not using coolant in this case. I had a drip line set up on the right with cutting fluid. And this is what's called a fly cutter, where you have it's basically a big wide cylinder with a lathe bit sticking out that spins. And so you're basically lathing vertically there.
Okay.
So
cool.
it's spinning, cutting like that, right to left. And what I'm doing here is cutting a flat finish on this surface here.
That's awesome.
And that was fun to do. And really, the main thing with this is all in the setup. It takes longer to do the setup than it does to actually cut the part.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why last time you were here, we talked about tool changeover.
Yeah.
And how that's a huge pain in the ass.
Oh, it's a huge pain. We're dealing with it right now where
Get that, the tobacco?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
where the machinist at work is running like 40 hours worth of machining this week. And so we're like trying to figure out where can we take tool time away? Where can we make it more efficient? How can we make it faster? Because it's just like, how do you take 40 hours and make it 30 or 20 worth of time?
Yeah.
You know? And so we're at the point now
Maximize
where he has
shareholder
to stop.
value. Yeah.
Exactly. He has to stop machining one part at a time, and we got to change to where he's doing 4 at a time or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
And so we got to completely change the process, and that's going to involve machining a special fixture plate to stick stuff into to hold it while it's being machined. And then you can flip it all over and do the other side and all that.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting as far as like trying to make things more efficient and take less time.
Yeah.
But also not screw anything up. Like in this case here, it took me forever just to get the thing fixtured up because
I can see
you get it on blocks and you get it kind of tightened down and you start indicating across the surface, okay, I think I got it reasonably flat. Let me start tightening it down.
Yeah.
Boom,
And
that
that
changes
changes
everything. And then you got to start tightening down slowly and readjusting. And oh shit, I need a shim here. Undo everything, stick a shim under there, and redo everything. Took forever to get this thing in line, but finally you get it dialed across the surface, left and right, and okay, I'm within 1,000th of an inch. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's. And again, this is, I think this machine's available for $7,000 to $10,000.
Wow.
Then people can just go buy these.
Yeah.
And they sell interchangeable parts for them. And you have all these people online that are modding them and coming up with all these new tools that you can use in them. And it's just fascinating. And people are using them in their garage.
Yeah.
Like, I got this thing in my garage. I'm just cranking parts out.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the idea of, the sort of crowdsourcing, or I guess it would be more like open source, like what we think of as open source programming, where anyone can kind of come in and get the programming language and then make changes and then offer it to people.
Yeah.
Because it's open source.
Yeah.
And then everybody can read what you did and see what's going on with anybody who understands programming can kind of see what's happening. So the same thing with the machine, like, where it's not just that company doing it, but you actually have millions of minds
working on
it all the time. This is when economies of scale come in terms of advancement. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, and you see the same thing with the 3D printer community.
That's what I'm talking about.
Where they've got.
That's even better because you're like,
all kinds
make
of
your part.
crazy. Yeah, exactly. It's insane.
Use your existing printer to make parts to make your printer even better.
Exactly.
Then you can make this part to make it even more awesome.
Yeah. It's incredible. But yeah, I mean, this is an idea of what we can do at home with all the technology we've come up with so far for precision. It's fascinating, and it blows my mind sometimes. But and that's really like the end of the presentation, where I kind of want to take it. And so, what does this mean for the stuff we've talked about?
Yeah,
and
so you can end the screen share.
Yeah.
Hope the watcher comes back.
Watcha.
Oh, there you are.
Hey.
We got 2 videos running here.
That's right. And GMA is there twice.
So, going back to the certification standards for a surface plate, remember that was 50 micro inches.
Yeah.
The square that Christopher Dunn used to measure the boxes at the Serapeum was calibrated to 50 thousandths of an inch square.
Right. I think I remember you saying that. Yeah.
So you're looking at stone boxes that meet AA grade laboratory for flatness spec.
God. On the inside.
On the inside.
So that was where the inside wall of the box met the top of the box.
Yes.
That 90-degree angle.
Yes.
So in terms of, like, you would have to cut out the inside of the box and then lay the box on its side, and that surface is one of 3 surfaces, and you'd have to rub the whole thing down with 2 other blocks until it was totally flat.
Totally flat.
But the blocks that you would rub on the inside of that had to be smaller
than the inside
of the box,
yeah.
which means you wouldn't end up with anything flat across the entire length of the inside wall.
Exactly.
Which means you have to have a machine tool.
Yeah, exactly. You can't grind them that flat.
That's incredible. So what does that mean?
No sand and freaking hand is going to make it that flat.
No.
Yeah.
No hand and sand is going to make it that flat. You can't do that.
So can we safely call that a Johnson box?
It'd be a Johansson.
A Johansson box.
A Johansson block. You also mentioned that the lid was sat down so flat on the box that it made a hermetic seal.
Right, that's what I've read.
That's ringing.
Yeah, it's basically ringing to the top.
That's why they couldn't pry them off of there. They had to bust into the side.
Blow it open. They couldn't pry them off. They're rung closed.
That's freaking awesome.
That is freaking mind blowing.
And you saw that picture. It's not just atmospheric pressure holding those things together.
Right, yeah. It's not.
They had 200 pounds hanging on the bottom of
those 2 little blocks. Like, freaking wild.
Yeah.
So, obviously, whoever made those boxes, whether it be the ancient Egyptians or someone before them, they knew precision.
Yeah.
And again,
to
you have
a certain degree.
Yeah.
To the same degree we know now.
Yeah.
If not better.
And also the fact that they did it multiple times. Like
24 times?
24,
Something
26
like that?
boxes in there. So that implies that you can mass produce precision surfaces.
Where are their standards? Their standards should
question.
be somewhere.
Right.
In some other cave.
Right.
Hidden in a
where's their 3
climate controlled room.
Yeah.
Where are their 3 plates?
It's hidden in a climate controlled cave.
But seriously, like,
they got to be there somewhere. Or there's got to be some reference there.
Wow.
Because I'm not seeing any optical flats turning up in archaeology.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how would you check that with it? You couldn't. I mean, how would you check that with glass? You'd have to use the.
Well, you couldn't technically because you're supposed to use an optical flat larger than the surface you're testing.
Yeah.
You can't fit an optical flat larger than the side of the inside of the box inside the box.
That's right.
That's nuts. So it would be like your machining tool that is built with precision tools, so that you start out building all of the parts with these precision standards, and then you end up with a machine that is pieced together with all these precision tools, and now you know that when the machine head moves down, it's moving down in a perfectly vertical straight line.
Right.
And it's moving side to side, perfectly flat.
Right. And you still have to go verify that occasionally.
Right.
So like every once in a while you have to go correct the backlash.
Yeah, if the machine isn't in a set place, because you're actually doing all the cutting of these blocks in the tunnels, and we know that happened, which implies you're moving the machine from block to block, because it doesn't appear that there was a manufacturing site.
Yeah, because isn't there one block in there that's completely solid?
Yeah.
That's like halfway in the tunnel somewhere?
I don't know if it's completely solid or if it's hollowed out. I can't remember. But there's also a lid sitting in there.
Right, there's a lid sitting on the ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unpolished.
Right.
It's not finished.
Yeah, and there's one block that's just rough. It hasn't been finished, but I don't know if it's been hollowed out or not.
I think it's been hollowed out, but it's not finished at all.
Okay, yeah.
But I haven't seen a picture of it from the top. Like, no one's
right,
taking
you can't
the
get up
picture.
there.
Kill the cameraman, just stay on the. Oh no! Don't look at the ground.
Yep. So if you're moving the machine around, you know,
once again, it's
like all these precision machines are like locked into place.
Yeah.
And you put the working material into the machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, the machine never moves.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's what makes it precise.
Yeah, you're taking the machine to the work.
Right.
In this case.
How do you maintain that repeatability when you're moving the machine all the time?
Right.
Now, I mean, you go back to surface plates. Obviously, the earliest flat surface anyone could think of is liquid, right?
Yeah.
So there are methods for determining flatness based off, say, a pool of mercury or something like that. Like you can use an electrode probe to.
Yeah, now that's another interesting thing is that pools of mercury have been found nearby pyramids.
Right.
Or under them or
underneath
whatever.
them. And yeah, that's just weird.
It's wild.
But the blocks are set in sockets.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if they're
finished underneath.
Yeah,
that's a good
that would
question.
tell you something. If they were finished in place, then they would not be finished beneath
the socket,
where they're
beneath
sitting.
the edge of the socket. Yeah,
But then the socket would have to be a pretty rough socket
that's right. You're right.
to fit a rough block into.
Yeah.
I wonder how clean that edge is around
Yeah.
the bottom. That'll tell you.
Yeah, and I was also thinking because last time we talked about how the inside corners of the block, like you were saying that it was 5/16.
It's a 5/32 radius.
5/32 radius. Yeah,
all the way up and down, according to
Right.
Christopher Dunn. Yeah.
right. But
Hey, there he is.
the Watcher's back. We lost you, buddy.
Yeah, he muted himself again.
Okay, yeah.
Very fast.
Very quickly muted himself. Yeah, so I was just saying, like we were talking about how you'd either have to have an incredibly long drill bit because they're big. You'd have to have a very long bit, or you have to have a moving ball.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, and I was just thinking about it, like you would have to have the ball end bit anyway because you got to do the ones on the bottom.
Yeah.
and you can't do that with it.
Right.
You can't get at it with it. So it has to be a ball end.
On a 5-axis gimbal, basically.
Yeah, right. Yeah, on a long arm that can reach down in
way
there.
down in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
So, yeah.
Especially when you put it in terms of it's on the order of flatness of a AA laboratory grade surface
Right,
plate.
the
Like
flattest
the
thing
flattest things we
we
make.
make today.
Mind blown.
Mind blown.
Yeah,
Thank you, GMA.
that's what we're here for.
Wow.
Yeah, so all that stuff you showed us it basically is now allows you to look at those things again and say, okay, like you have to have these kinds of things to do that.
Yeah. You have to have these kinds of things to do that. You don't just go out there with a copper chisel or a dolomite, a ball of dolomite,
yeah.
and
Yeah, that's-
pound it out. No, that's
That's the other thing is that the obelisks and stuff that are,
Yeah.
the unfinished
They're-
obelisks. Yeah.
well, the finished
the
ones.
finished
They're
ones.
all, they're
Yeah.
so flat.
Yeah.
They're ridiculous.
You don't do that pounding them with dolomite.
Yeah. And you would literally like to make that surface flat all the way across the whole thing, you would need another surface that's the same size
Right, to reference.
Well,
And
two
then
of them.
Yeah.
And then you need to be able to move a 400-ton object to rub it back and forth
Yeah.
on top of the
Yeah.
other 400-ton object.
Or you have a giant machine.
Yeah. One of those.
Well, if you look at the tunneling around the unfinished obelisk, I mean, it's like whatever is making those
scoops,
sort of squarish.
Yeah. And it is like scoops almost.
Yeah.
Like it went in, and Christopher Dunn talks about that in his book. Where
I saw you brought it. It's called Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt. Yeah, I need to read that.
Actually, I'm done with it if you want to borrow it.
Yes.
Fantastic book. I recommend anyone go check it out.
Does this one read to you? Or?
It has pictures.
It has pictures. Even has full color pictures too, which are really nice. But there's just some fantastic stuff in there. The first thing he talks about is the Ramses heads.
Yeah.
And the complex three-dimensional curves that are cut onto these Ramses faces.
Yeah.
And that's just fascinating in and of itself because, one, they're like 40, 60 feet in the air.
Yeah.
They're massive.
Right.
And all four of them are the same.
Yeah. Mass produced. Technically speaking.
Massive produced.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Wow. Yeah.
So, yeah, if you're not doing it with the simple rubbing of three surfaces together to get your standard, and then whatever you make your tools based on those standards, and then you take the tool in there and you actually have your precision tool and then this grinding surface, and you just keep working at it until you get it flat. I mean, that seems nearly impossible already. Like the inside of the Serapeum boxes,
Right.
So you could imagine that if you wanted to create a flat surface and you had that precision measuring tool, you could do it by hand. It would take a ridiculous amount of work and detail, and then if you messed up, you'd have to grind the entire rest of the surface down.
You're talking about like basically hand scraping,
right? I've done some woodworking and just creating a flat surface on wood that you can fairly easily sand.
Yeah,
with sandpaper it's an insane amount of work to try to plane a surface by hand, even a small wooden surface.
Can't do it with a chainsaw.
No, you can't. But yeah, so you have that idea, but then if you want to like get even more accurate or standardize the way you're measuring things, like eventually, like what we have done in modern history is started to use the measurement of the speed of light as a standard. What other natural standards can you find? We had talked about this before when you were just planning to do the research into precision. Is there a crystal in a surface or some natural medium that you could use to say, well, this crystallizes in a natural 90-degree angle, or but then we were like, well, but other crystals can build up on that, and you wouldn't know.
Yeah, I haven't found anything.
It's like, that's what I was saying. It's measuring the wavelengths of light is about
the best you can
the best you can
do.
And
I mean, for time, what we use a cesium atom vibrating back and forth.
Yeah.
So that's
cesium
another
clock.
Right.
Natural one,
So
how do you see that when you don't have electron microscope or anything like that?
Right. That's what I was trying to get to, is that any way you want to eventually develop the ability to have mobile tools and all of this precision in various different ways, you've got to be able to do some of these other things that are pretty serious technology that, according to the standard model, these people didn't have at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
the watcher is asking about granite because he's like, it's not the same material. It's basically an aggregate of a bunch of stuff. So he says crystal inclusions, soft spots will all sand at different rates. Mm-hmm. And that's true.
Yeah, you can't manually sand it.
Right, you can't manually do it.
Yeah, you have to block it.
You have to cut it and block it.
You have to use a block.
So then how do you do your interior surfaces?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It had to be machined.
Right, it has to be machined.
Yeah. It has to be cut out because you can't grind that flat.
Yeah.
And in order to build that machine, they must have had all different other
All
types of
kinds of-
standards set, because those machines obviously were
Required
used
standards,
and they
yeah.
needed to have parts that were replaceable. Otherwise, you couldn't reproduce the same thing once any part of the machine broke.
So let's talk
Or
about
wore
that.
down.
Let's talk about that briefly. Where are the tools? Right. So we're saying, well, this looks like they had machines. So then the next question people ask are, where are the tools? And I've always said, well, if they were made of metal, they're gone. You know,
I would agree with you. Yeah.
the only metal that doesn't corrode is gold. Well, I mean, I guess mercury doesn't really, but
Does lead corrode?
Mercury
Lead
will
will-
evaporate.
it evaporates. Yeah. Lead
Lead will eventually corrode.
Lead corrodes very slowly. Aluminum, everything else you can think of corrodes, and there's almost no way. Like, and the thing about that kind of corrosion, or the thing about metal, is that it can't be preserved like organics can be preserved by certain mineral.
Right. You can't fossilize metal.
Right.
Either that, or we've lost that technology. I mean, there's the certain artifacts that are made of iron that still haven't rusted. And,
That's true.
and there's that. I mean, but
Like the iron pillar and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think that actually has something to do with like a layer of phosphate on the outside.
Well, so
That-
there's something about their smelting process.
Yeah, that it's kind of like how we lost the ability to make real Damascus
steel. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. But so the iron hammer that was found, a fossil,
yeah,
that one also has the same. Why isn't that hammerhead gone? And it has the same incorruptible kind of material. And then there's one other object, I'm trying to remember what it was, that has the same, it doesn't rust, that's made of iron, that's also ancient.
but there's still few and far between, and
Right.
they're
And
simple.
and iron is soft. It's when you're making these kind of machines, you need stronger, hardened
tool steel, basically.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with granite, you got to have diamond cutting edges and
Right.
things like that.
So what I'm getting at though with the tools is that because I've kind of gotten into some conversations with people about this, and I'm like, well, if they were made of metal, they're gone, and they're like, or they're buried, maybe they're underwater, under some coral. And I'm like, no, they're gone. Like
They're gone.
They are
if
gone.
they're underwater, they're definitely gone. Have
Right.
you looked at the Titanic lately?
Yeah.
It's almost gone.
So unless the tools they made were using material sciences that we still don't have yet, they're gone. Even if they were like totally buried in something that would fossilize everything else there, the metal will go away. It doesn't get fossilized. It can't be preserved. I'm trying to think of it right now. Like, is there a way where it could have been preserved? Something like, I guess if it's sunk in a pool of oil or something, maybe I don't even know if that would preserve it for very long. If you're talking about 10,000 years.
Yeah, I don't know. A pool of melted
The pool of
whale
oil
fat.
won't last. I mean, the pool of oil will turn into gel.
Let's say that it fell into a tar pit, right? Like the La Brea tar pits.
Yeah.
Could there be a metal machine way down at the bottom of that thing from ancient times because it's been preserved by being in that tar? I don't know, but it'd have to be a circumstance like that. That's why we don't find the tools.
Yeah.
So you have two. Usually, the way I look at it is there's two ways the tools disappear. Right. Number one is if there's a cataclysm or whatever, and people come along later that aren't that advanced, but they see the metal, they're going to want the metal to make tools.
Yeah.
Right. So if you've got this machine that's all scrappy laying down and it's corroding, people are going to be taking parts of it as best they can to get sharp edges because it'll be better. You can kind of make yourself a knife out of some piece of it. So it will either disappear by scavenging or it will disappear by corrosion. And there's no burying it or underwater or coral growing on it or anything is going to preserve it. It's gone. So
unless it's in a pool of mercury.
Maybe it's in a pool of mercury.
Unless it's gold.
Right. Still not hard enough.
Gold's not, you can't.
Well, I was saying, though, don't gold and mercury
Oh,
start to combine?
Yeah, they will. Yeah, that's right. If you drop something golden into mercury,
it'll melt.
It'll melt.
It'll
That's
just be dissolved.
Mercury will dissolve it and then evaporate and then leave the gold at the bottom.
That's where I left that.
Yeah, it's like there's this thin, flat sheet of gold at the bottom of the mercury box, and you're like, that's where I dropped my ring.
Maybe that's how you get a perfect flat surface.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to get a flat surface.
Yep. Don't hit it with a hammer by accident. You'll dent it.
Another one I saw for getting a flat surface or a relatively flat surface is melting glass on top of a pool of molten metal, because the glass will float on top of the metal. And that's a trick they actually use when
I've seen that.
When they're smelting iron or something like that and they need to keep the air out, they'll cover it with glass so that when everything melts, the glass keeps a liquid cap on top of the molten metal, basically.
That's cool.
And so you can get a really flat surface on that glass between the flat surface of the molten metal and the glass.
Yeah. I was seeing something where somebody was doing that with molten aluminum or something like that. They were
capping it, basically.
Pouring glass onto it to get flat. Yeah. I can't remember what that was. Somebody was showing me that the other day. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another way to establish a relatively flat surface. Yeah. What is he saying?
He's saying he's trying to come up with some magnetic way to keep the metal tools from disappearing.
Okay.
That's a whole bunch of watcher BS right there. Don't even read it.
Hey, you can't BS the watcher.
That's right.
But he might BS you.
That's right. He says it at the bottom. It's a stacks on stacks answer.
Yeah.
Stacks of assumptions there.
Hey, you're not supposed to be giving the watcher any shit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. That's never going to happen.
Never gonna happen.
So do you think that they could have been doing it like with those the Baalbek blocks, like they're pretty freaking flat.
Yeah.
They sit that, like, even if you're not talking about the gigantic ones, you're just looking at the platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they've got those ones that are that widen the base of the structure. Right. So at the bottom there's like big blocks, and then they've got these ones that are set on top of that actually, I guess you would think of it more as like they start out wide and they slant inwards.
Yeah.
And then they've got the really big trilithon blocks are on top of that.
On top of that, yeah.
Yeah. So they actually were starting out with a wider base, and then they slanted it in, and then put the really big blocks up on top of that.
Which kind of makes sense if you think about like building a roadbed or something. You start with gravel.
Right.
Smaller stuff.
And it's way wider.
Yeah. And then you pile the big stuff on top so the little stuff can kind of settle. And
right. Yeah. But it's the same thing.
Sense,
You're having to plane these flat surfaces because those are ashlars. They're huge square
blocks,
or rectangular.
Yeah. Well, and they fit very, very tightly together.
Right.
Too.
Yeah. Exactly. Same thing with the granite blocks in the Great Pyramid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd be very interested to see if someone's actually done some kind of flatness measurement on those across the length and width to see how much do they deviate across the length of, say, the pregnant woman,
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know if they've done that.
It's sitting out there open for anyone to go up to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, take a straight edge to it, for God's sakes.
Yeah. They have done it in the King's Chamber, but of course you can only check the front surfaces.
Right. You
the
can't
face,
check the backside
or the tops or the bottoms. Yeah. Presumably those are really flat though, because you can't slide a piece of paper between them.
Yeah. They're wrong.
But I've seen people argue that and not necessarily for the King's Chamber blocks, but like say for the like at Sacsayhuaman, right? You've got those walls, but they're deep, and the blocks on the other side are not the same as the ones that you're looking at in the front.
Right. They've got like a middle section that's gravel, basically.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like a
buffer
wall.
People have argued that like that's easy to do because you only have to match up an edge instead of the whole
backside and all that. Yeah. Well, no, that's still not easy.
It's still not easy to do. And
no.
This is a great sentence by the watcher. Dude, if my immune system isn't bombarded with constant shit, my confidence's indefatigability might be less indomitably infallible.
That's a lot of eyes there, bro.
Indefatigability. It's awesome.
I think that's a good place to end the show. Unless you guys have anything else to say.
No, man, that was fantastic, G-May. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Appreciate it myself. It was a lot of fun.
Hell yeah.
Another fantastic show by GMA. All right. You guys can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Go to the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Check out the Snakeskins, which is the merchandise page. You can comment there on any of the shows. Check out the Encyclopedia or the glossary of terms, which is things like non-Johnson.
Yeah.
We explain what non-Johnson means in the glossary.
Well, you have to add Johnson now, too.
I know, Johansson.
Johnson.
Yeah, Johansson blocks.
Follow us on Twitter at SnakeBros, SNKBRS. Share the shows anywhere you can. Facebook is great. We have a Facebook group. It is run by Jordan. Thanks to him very much.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
The Watcher's on there. The Grand Watcher's on there. A bunch of people are getting on there. So go to the Facebook group. Also, donate to our pyramid scheme. Send us straight to pyramids.
Yeah. Thanks to everybody who has donated.
Yes.
Still donations rolling in. Really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. So there's a one-time donation button that goes through PayPal. You can use debit or credit card or whatever you want, or your PayPal account on the website. Also, there is a Patreon link. Give us reviews. Thanks to all of you who are doing that. Like, I see lots of 5-star reviews rolling in. Thank you guys so much. That's really great. It helps us spread the show around. And I saw the other day that on the charts we are at like number 78 in philosophy.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
See, that's because of me. I'm the guy that's doing all the philosophy.
All right.
I mean, think about that, man. We're in the top 100 of philosophy, guys. Yeah, so thank you guys so much for that. Giving us those reviews really helps with that, and we rise in the ranks, and so we show up on searches better. Also, History Shift. Follow him at History Shift on Twitter. Also, his website, historyshift.com, where he is detailing his adventures searching for dolmens and glacial erratics in Montana. And there's other interesting drama going on with that. So check that out. Also, he gets chased by Sam Squanch. He makes all of our podcasts into videos. So if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, this is his work. Thanks to him so much. You guys can find us on YouTube, Brothers of the Serpent. Also, he is on YouTube, at History Shift. What are you guys laughing at?
GMA is like talking to the people on YouTube.
Hey, YouTubes.
Yep. Also, Poddoodle. This guy's really cool. Follow him on Twitter. Just look up Poddoodle, or on YouTube, Poddoodle. He actually makes videos of him sketching digitally while listening to the show. So he's done a couple of our shows. He's going to keep doing more. So check him out, Poddoodle. Thanks to him so much. You got a lot of work to do, buddy, because we have a lot of shows. Can't wait to see if he does this one. So it'll be great. All right. Yeah. I think that's it.
We love you.
Snakes. Yeah. We love all of you. Thank you so much.
Always have.
Good night, Adamu.
Always will.
Make it flat.
Get back to work.